So it may feel like AI is taking over, but there has to be some solutions to navigating this new world. Kara Brisson-Boivin has a few ideas. She's the director of research with Media Smarts. Kara, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Your team put together a report on building resilience against online misinformation, and I know you focused in on AI generative video. What did you find?
Yeah, we did a study recently with over 5,000 adults 18 and up, and we found that, perhaps not surprisingly for most of those folks, it's really hard to determine what is real from what is fake online, and in particular when it comes to what we call visual misinformation. So this includes image-based information. A lot of people struggle to understand, just by looking at content online, what was real and what was fake.
I noticed something in your report that said to look out for visual information that is slippery. What does that mean?
Yeah, this was a really important finding from the work, actually. Slippery misinformation and slippery visual misinformation in particular is information that contains elements of truth. So, an example from our sort of current context would be we all know Hurricane Melissa has happened recently, but a lot of content circulating online contains all kinds of falsified information about what's actually happening in the context of that hurricane. A video that was circulating really widely was, of sharks sort of being washed up into resorts all along, the coast of Jamaica. And, again, the hurricane is happening, but the content that we're seeing is not necessarily giving us, fact-based information about that issue.
Yeah, very problematic in the short term. But when you think about the long term for both young and old consumers, what is your biggest worry?
I think the biggest worry and what we found in the work is that people are leaning towards a false bias. And what that means is that people are most inclined to think they can't trust or believe anything online. And while we want people to have a certain level of skepticism, we want people to question content, when they see it, we don't want people to fall into this habit or pattern of becoming cynical, where we think we can't trust anything online. That has really important and problematic knock-on effects for things like our democracy and our ability to feel like we can trust, in institutions or in, expertise.
Have we seen that happening already? Because we have had a lot of online misinformation in the sphere of our world for quite a long time now. Have we seen tangible examples of that?
I think so. I mean, we're definitely seeing it in the context of elections. We're seeing it in the ways that, people are not necessarily showing up when it comes, to voting. I think there's an apathy problem that we've seen as a result of this. We've definitely seen it in the context of, as I mentioned, being able to feel like we can trust what we're seeing online, that we can trust expertise. And I think to some degree, and our research is showing that people are starting to lose the sense that there is something they can do in this context. And I think that's really problematic. We don't want people to feel like there isn't anything they can do, that the sort of information ecosystem is beyond their control, and again, that they can't trust.
Okay, so
Online.
let's talk about what they can do, because that's what we want to help people with at home. I know you're focused on solutions. Give me an idea about what the average person can do.
It is important that people know there are some steps that we can take, very simple, easy steps to be able to verify content online. And the Break the Fake program at Media Smarts helps to teach those. The most important thing is to find the source. We can't just read a headline or see a video online and take it at face value. We have to go find the source of that information and then verify that source, be able to determine if that source is reliable and trustworthy.
And what happens if you can't find it?
I think if you can't find the source, for example, on a piece of visual content, and if you need to use something like a reverse image search, if you can't find the source, it's very likely that that content was AI generated. And if you can't find the source, I'd be increasingly, skeptical about the validity of that content. You should be able to find a source that you can verify to determine if it's reliable. Once you find the source and you can verify it, you can also check other sources to see if other, sources that are reliable are sharing or posting similar stories. And then finally, you can check and rely on fact checkers, experts who are doing this, work for us. So you can look to sources like Snopes, although it's a little bit of an American-leaning source. Media Smarts also has a custom search tools that allow you to search a whole bunch of reliable sources. And you often only need to do one of those steps. So it can take you under a minute to do one of those things to determine if something is real or true or not.
Kara, I wanted to ask, do you think we need regulation with all of these text to video tools that are just so sophisticated right now?
Yeah, I think that's an area where we're going to need to put a lot of effort in this country in the coming, weeks and months. I think as we're seeing, especially new technologies evolve and emerge so quickly, like AI and the impacts that's having on the information ecosystem, as I said, we can't lay the responsibility solely on individuals for sifting through information online. We often say in the field, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. And
Mm.
we're also seeing backsliding on the part of a lot of platforms in terms of content moderation. So I think, there is work to be done to help hold the platforms accountable for higher standards of information in the spaces that we're engaging in.
And what specifically would you like to see if, we're talking regulation?
I think we need to see again higher, accountability for platforms in terms of, fact checking. I also think we need, a commitment and investment in digital media literacy education for folks across the country of all ages. Lots of countries around the world have invested in national digital media literacy strategies that support people of all ages in being able to develop the critical skills to do things like sift through information. And in Canada, we haven't yet done that. So we're falling behind a lot of other nations who are already investing at scale nationwide.
So we have some media literacy homework to catch up on, that's for sure. Kara, great to have you on the program today.